On a cold December morning in 2017, a brand new high-speed passenger train was making its very first trip on a faster, safer route. But in just seconds, everything went terribly wrong. Traveling more than twice the safe speed, the train flew off the tracks, plummeting onto a busy highway below. Cars were crushed, people were injured, and 3 innocent lives were lost. What caused this disaster on the new rail line, designed to save time and improve safety? In this video, we will uncover the shocking mistakes, ignored warnings, and the hidden failures that led to the deadly DuPont train derailment. DuPont is a small city in the northwest of the United States. It has just over 10,000 people as of 2020. The city is in the state of Washington, about 16 miles or 26 kilometers southwest of Tacoma, and 11 miles or 18 kilometers east of Olympia. DuPont is located on a railway line called the Lakeview Subdivision, also known as the Point Defiance Bypass. This is a single-track, non-electrified branch line that opened in 1891. Because most U.S. railways prioritize freight trains, the old route was often crowded. Around the year 2000, a decision was made to upgrade this bypass to move passenger trains away from the busy Point Defiance line. One tricky spot on the old railway route was a bridge over Interstate 5 near DuPont. Here, the track made a sharp S-shaped curve. During the upgrade, there were plans to build a new bridge with a wider curve to make the turn safer and faster. But these plans were dropped because of high costs. So, the section with the bridge, called the Nisqually Bridge after a nearby river, kept the old sharp curve. Trains had to slow down to 30 miles or 48 kilometers per hour there. In comparison, other parts of the new line nearby allowed trains to reach speeds up to 79 miles or 127 kilometers per hour. The upgraded rail line ends just 1 mile or 3,300 feet west of the bridge, where the bypass joins back with the main rail line. The train involved in the crash was called the Cascades. It is a passenger service run by Amtrak since 1971. The Cascades connects Vancouver in Canada with Eugene, Oregon, covering a distance of 467 miles or 752 kilometers. On the day of the accident, the southbound train was operating as number 501. It carried 77 passengers and 6 crew members. Among the passengers were train enthusiasts, many of whom were likely on board to experience the very first run on the new Point Defiance bypass. The train in the accident was pulled by locomotive number 1402, owned by the Washington State Department of Transportation. It was a Siemens Charger, a modern passenger locomotive delivered just a few months before the crash. Amtrak used it for their Cascades service under a contract agreement. On the day of the crash, this was only the 7th day that locomotive 1402 had been in service, and it was pulling its 5th train. On the day of the crash, the Cascades train was made up of a Mark VI Talgo pendular set. This was a 12-car passenger train made to stay permanently connected. It included first-class and second-class coaches, 2 bistro cars, and a baggage car. The Talgo Mark VI was first introduced in the 1980s. It features a special suspension system with a passive tilting design. This is where the name pendular comes from. Unlike most trains, the cars don't rest directly on their wheels. Instead, the wheel sets, or bogies, are placed between the cars and connected to the roof. This setup lets the cars hang slightly and naturally tilt into curves, up to 3.5 degrees, without needing a complex hydraulic system. This tilting allows the train to take turns at higher speeds than normal trains. And because the system is lighter and simpler, it's more efficient than traditional active tilting systems. The Cascades Mark VI trains were always paired with a second locomotive at the rear. This rear engine wasn't usually used for power. It mostly served as a cab car, allowing the train to be operated from either end. On the day of the crash, that role was filled by Amtrak locomotive number 181, a GEP 42DC, part of the Genesis series. This diesel locomotive was a modern upgrade of the earlier P40DC and had been in service since the early 1990s. December 17, 2017, A cold Sunday morning in Seattle. At 6:10 a.m., Amtrak Cascades train 501 pulls out of King Street Station, running 10 minutes late. It's the first ever passenger run on the brand new Point Defiance bypass, a route meant to shave time off the Seattle to Portland journey. Inside the cab of the brand new Siemens Charger locomotive sit two men, the train's engineer and a qualifying conductor. The conductor is there to learn the route, a requirement before operating trains on this section. Behind them, a trainee attendant is also on board, learning from a lead attendant. That brings the total crew to 7 people. As the train glides southward, the cab's voice recorder captures a calm exchange, the two men discussing signals, operations, and safety. The atmosphere is focused but relaxed. They pull into Tacoma Dome Station at 7:13 a.m., now 32 minutes behind schedule. During the conversation, the engineer admits something important. This new route is still unfamiliar to him. He tells the conductor it's a learning experience, too. He's only done one full round trip before, and he's still figuring out the right throttle positions to manage speed on this unfamiliar track. At 7:17 a.m., Cascades train 501 left Tacoma in a light rain. Visibility was good, about 10 miles or 16 kilometers. Inside the cab, the mood was calm. The engineer and the conductor had shifted their conversation to future assignments and upcoming trips, but everything suggested the engineer was still alert and focused on the job. At exactly 7:32 and 16 seconds, the train passed a warning sign. It was alerting the crew of a speed limit drop ahead. Just 2 miles, or 3.2 kilometers, ahead was a sharp curve at the bridge over Interstate 5. And even if he thought it was too early to start slowing down anyway. His plan was to reduce speed at control point 188, 1 mile or 1.6 kilometers, 6 kilometers before the curve. 5 seconds later, the train passed milepost 18. The camera inside the cab clearly shows the engineer looking in the direction of the sign. But in his interview after the crash, he said he never saw it. 34 seconds later, at 7:32:55, train 501 passed a green signal at control point 188. Just in front of it was a white sign, placed next to a silver equipment shed. But the train's headlights reflected off the wet metal surface, making the sign hard to read. By 7:33 a.m., the conversation in the cab had turned casual again. The crew was talking about the qualifying conductor's return trip later that day. But outside the cab, danger was quickly approaching. The train had now passed milepost 19, just half a mile, or 800 meters, from the sharp curve over Interstate 5. Suddenly, 3 double beeps echoed through the cab. The train's overspeed warning system had kicked in. A message flashed on both screens. The engine's traction power had been cut. This meant one thing. The train was now going faster than allowed on any part of the route. The engineer glanced at his right-hand display, then looked forward. He checked the screen again, this time for 2 full seconds, and looked back ahead. He spoke. "I guess that happens when—" But his voice trailed off. He was scanning the desk, searching for answers. But time was running out. At exactly 7:33 and 34 seconds, the train's forward-facing camera captured a critical sight: the concrete retaining walls near the Interstate 5 overpass. Just ahead, the 30-mile-per-hour, or 48-kilometer-per-hour speed limit sign came into view. This was milepost 19.75. 7 seconds later, at 7:33:41, the cab's inward-facing camera recorded the engineer leaning forward toward the screens. He spoke aloud. "We just tripped the overspeed." In his interview after the crash, he explained that he wasn't familiar with how the new Siemens Charger's overspeed protection worked. It hadn't been covered in his training, and it hadn't triggered during any of his previous runs with this type of locomotive. Realizing the system had kicked in, he quickly applied full braking power, but not the emergency brakes. Then, he did something strange. He took his hand off the brake handle, hesitated, then placed it back again. At this point, the train was flying toward the curve, and there was almost no time left. At 7:33 and 44 seconds, the driver saw the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit sign. He immediately shouted an expletive. Then just 2 seconds later, he said quietly, "We're dead." It was 7:33:50 a.m. when the train entered the sharp, left-hand curve leading onto the Interstate 5 overpass. But the train wasn't slowing down enough. It was still moving at 78 miles per hour. That's 125 kilometers per hour, more than double the safe speed for that turn. The lead locomotive, the Siemens Charger, jumped the tracks instantly. It veered off to the right, pulling several cars behind it. The engine plunged down a wooded embankment, straight onto the southbound lanes of Interstate 5. It struck a car on the highway from behind and finally came to a violent stop. The passenger cars tore apart. Some flipped over, others broke off their suspension systems. One by one, they blocked the entire southbound freeway. Some cars ahead of the curve also derailed, flying left off the broken tracks and crashing onto the road below. 2 cars remained stuck on top of the overpass, tilted at a steep 45-degree angle. The only piece of the train that didn't derail was the rear locomotive, still sitting on the track, untouched, as if it had never moved. 3 people on board the train lost their lives in the crash. All of them were riding in car number 7504, the 6th car in the train. That car was destroyed. Over 3/4 of it lost what investigators call survival space. The floor and roof had collapsed inward, especially at both ends of the car. There was almost no chance for anyone inside to escape unharmed. 2 of the victims were thrown out of the car. A wheel set from the next car, car number 9, broke loose during the derailment and tore through the floor of 7504, punching a hole that ejected the passengers. The 3rd victim was still inside, killed instantly when the same wheel set struck them. Incredibly, 5 other passengers were also thrown out of different train cars as they flipped over, but they survived. Those cars had lost their windows in the crash, and the force of the derailment had flung people outside. In total, 57 people on board were injured. Another 8 were hurt on the highway when debris from the crashing train hit their vehicles. The first people to help after the crash were drivers on the highway. They had just managed to avoid the train and flying debris in front of them. Among these Good Samaritans were 3 soldiers from a nearby base. They had medical training and quickly began helping the injured. One of the soldiers, Mr. McCoy, later said they saw a train car hanging off the edge of the overpass. It looked like it could fall at any moment, right onto the injured survivors below. Acting fast, they pulled those survivors to safety. Then, using a crashed semi-truck nearby as a step, they climbed up into the dangling train car. Inside, the damaged seats and walls became a makeshift staircase, helping them rescue others trapped inside. Several passengers were trapped inside the crushed train cars. When firefighters arrived, they used special tools called spreaders and cutters to free those trapped. Ambulances quickly took the injured to 6 different hospitals nearby. Most of the survivors needed treatment for broken bones or injuries to their stomachs. Within hours, a state of emergency was declared. The Washington Military Department's Emergency Operations Center, based at a nearby military base, took charge of coordinating the rescue and recovery efforts. The locomotive, WSDOT number 1402, was badly damaged when it hit several trees during the derailment. But the 2 men inside the driver's cab survived, suffering broken bones and bruises from the impact. The cab's safety features helped protect the crew by keeping the space inside intact and even allowing the doors to still open after the crash. Despite this, the damage was so severe that the nearly new locomotive was declared a total loss and sent to the scrapyard after the investigation finished. After reviewing the recorded conversations, video footage, and data from the locomotive, investigators found the cause of the accident was clear. The driver did not pay enough attention to the speed limits and entered the sharp turn going more than 2.5 times the allowed speed. Amtrak fired the driver for breaking safety rules. The conductor, who was also in the cab, had a screen showing the train's speed. But after the screen went dark, it was designed to turn off without use. He left it off. Instead, he focused on taking notes and learning the new route, not checking the speed against limits. The investigation also found that the new bypass had an automatic train control system. This system can stop a train by itself if it goes too fast. But on the day of the accident, this system was not turned on yet. Amtrak said they were still installing and testing it, because the conductor was not supposed to watch the speed. The job of keeping the train at the right speed was left only to the driver. The report explains that the locomotive's overspeed warning went off because the train was going faster than the overall top speed allowed on the line. But this system was not designed to check the speed limits at specific locations, only the general top speed. The driver had only driven one trip on this line before, at night and in the opposite direction. This made him very unfamiliar with the signs and landmarks that help drivers know where they are. Because of this, he confused some milepost signs after missing others and lost track of his exact location. Also, since he had very little training on the new type of locomotive, it took him almost 20 seconds to understand the overspeed warning. He was likely distracted by the confusing alarms and messages on the screens, and he didn't properly notice a speed limit sign he saw briefly. In short, the driver's lack of experience and limited training caused him to lose awareness of where he was and the speed limits. He wasn't distracted by other things like using a phone, but he still didn't keep proper control of the train's speed. To make things worse, the automatic train control system was not turned on that day. Because of this, nothing stopped the train from going too fast into the sharp turn once the driver lost track of his location and the speed limits. During the investigation, it was discovered that several train cars had lost their wheel sets and suspension systems in the derailment. One particular wheel set was identified as directly responsible for all 3 passenger deaths. This finding raised serious concerns about the safety of the Mark 6 train's design, especially its unusual suspension system. Each car's suspension involves a single wheel set attached near the roof in a large U-shaped frame. The car body essentially hangs from this frame, suspended between wheel sets, allowing it to swing like a pendulum when the train rounds a curve. This unique design enables the tilting motion that helps the train go faster around turns. Unlike most trains, only the end cars have conventional wheel sets mounted under the floor. Each end car has one wheel set shared with the adjacent car and one that is solely its own. During the derailment, 5 wheel sets, each weighing about 2 metric tons, completely detached from the train, becoming deadly steel projectiles. One of these heavy wheel sets dropped directly into the path of a passing subcompact SUV, a Kia Soul. The impact caused severe damage, crushing the car's engine block inward and trapping the driver inside. That same wheel set then struck a black Jeep nearby, causing similar heavy damage. Fortunately, despite the brutal force of the collisions, the occupants of both vehicles only suffered minor injuries. Tragically, one of the detached wheel sets penetrated the 6th car, AMTK 7504, causing the death of 1 passenger inside and the fatal ejection of 2 others from the car. The investigation detailed that each U-frame suspension is connected to the adjacent cars by 6 articulated connectors, 4 horizontal and 2 vertical, along with cushioning elements designed to absorb shocks and allow movement between cars. For a wheel set to fully detach, all 6 of these connectors must fail simultaneously, a rare but catastrophic event that directly contributed to the deadly outcome in this accident. Already skeptical about the crashworthiness of the Talgo Mark 6 cars, investigators consulted the manufacturer. Talgo explained that their train cars were designed to meet the UIC 556 safety guideline, established in 1990. This guideline sets standards for the construction of the body and frame of each railcar, ensuring they can withstand impact forces both laterally and longitudinally without deforming. However, the Talgo design did not meet a stricter U.S. federal requirement from 1999, which demands that train cars withstand 363 metric tons of pressure applied at the coupler level without permanent deformation. In response, Amtrak petitioned the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, in October 1999 to grandfather in the Talgo cars, which had already started service earlier that year. The FRA granted this special permission in September 2000, but under strict conditions. Safety cables had to be installed between the cars and their wheel sets, capable of resisting a longitudinal force of 35 metric tons, or about 77,000 pounds. The cars were only allowed to operate in dedicated uniform train sets, no mixing with other car types, and the end cars had to remain unoccupied. A locomotive, or a depowered locomotive cab car, had to run at both ends of the train. Operational speeds were limited to 127 kilometers per hour, or 79 miles per hour. The train sets were restricted to a submitted, approved list of routes, with no unauthorized additions allowed. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, concluded in their investigation that the Talgo Mark VI pendular cars were unfit for passenger service in the United States, directly contradicting the FRA's decision made 17 years earlier. Due to serious safety concerns, the NTSB recommended the immediate withdrawal of these cars from service. Following this recommendation, all remaining Talgo Mark VI cars were removed from service by June 2020 and sent to the scrapyard. In the aftermath of the accident, Amtrak faced lawsuits from over 35 individuals who suffered damages. By April 2022, the company had paid out more than 41.4 million euros, or around 45 million US dollars, covering injuries and related costs. Interestingly, the train's driver also sued Amtrak. He claimed the company failed to provide adequate training and allowed the rail line to operate before the train control system was fully functional. He argued that this negligence caused his own injuries. The case was settled out of court, with his lawyer releasing only a brief statement that the driver was taken care of for life. Now we want to hear your thoughts. Could this accident have been prevented? What changes do you think are necessary to make train travel safer? Share your opinions below, and let's start a conversation that could help prevent future disasters.